welcome to the Big Market Interview powered by Investonomics, an initiative by ICICI Direct. I have with me a very special guest, Mr. Sunil Subramaniam, Managing Director and CEO, Sundaram Mutual Fund. Welcome, Mr. Subramaniam.
Thank you.
So markets are at all-time high with so much of uncertainty around. Is it logical to stay this optimistic? And where do you see the markets from here?
So I think the reason the markets are at this level are to function of two factors. One is the extreme amount of liquidity that's floating around in the international system and in the domestic system, thanks to RBI. That's number one. Number two is that whatever be the pandemic's impact, I think that the long-term story, India growth story, remains intact. It's only a matter of delay by a few quarters. So when this liquidity is coming in, you have to bear in mind that not everybody is looking at a 1 month, 2 month horizon. There are people looking at 10-year, 15-year horizon, pension funds and the like. And those monies are actually looking at the current problems that economically there could be present as actually opportunities to buy good long-term stocks. So I think it's a combination of these two factors, that's liquidity plus the long-term story of India remains intact.
Mm-hmm. So the current market seems to be pricing in strong recovery that we saw post first wave of COVID. But don't you think it's different this time? Because this time the rural economy is hard hit. The kind of demand that we were expecting from rural to pick up is not there at this point in time.
So I agree with you that this, especially this summer was also the big time for consumption, like air conditioners, refrigerators. So it's come at the wrong time. And I don't deny that the quarterly results when they come out will reflect the impact. The GDP will reflect the impact. But please remember that the market trades in a series of forward expectations. Okay, so the current market is high, yes, because they expected a V-shaped recovery from the first wave of the pandemic, and that's not going to be lived up to. So you're going to see disappointment in earnings, but the market will quickly shift its side to the next cycle of growth whenever that happens and start discounting. So if you look at, it's a series of forward P's that the market trades in. Market takes current disappointment in its stride and says, okay, in the future I will make it up. So I think the key here again is liquidity. What I am saying cannot get implemented if there is no money. So with this thought process, because there is ample liquidity around, right, the market is allowed to look beyond short-term shortcomings of the economy and the company's earnings into a bright future. And that gets strengthened because when you deprive a certain necessities from the demand cycle, when it comes back with double force as a pent-up demand. So you will soon find that when we have controlled the second wave, and if the vaccinations are projected to go on track at, say, double the rate of current vaccination, then you will actually see that demand may bounce back very strongly and earnings expectations could exceed markets' imagination also. So it's going to be a very volatile period in that sense.
Mm-hmm. So you are known for your successful track record in mid-caps and small-caps investing. I have listened to a couple of your interviews where you suggested that this is the time to get into mid-cap and small-cap space. Do you still feel so? Because we have seen a very good momentum in small-cap and mid-cap in the last 1.5 years. So would you say that this is still a right time to really enter into mid-cap and small-cap space?
So I would like to, at this point of time, differentiate between mid-caps and small-caps. So if you look at the one forward piece that I was talking about, the large caps have risen because of FII flows, right? The small caps have risen equally because there is very little liquidity in the stocks. The free float is very less. So even a small amount of buying in small caps has taken it to record high. And today the small cap index is trading at the same level as large cap index. That means the earnings expense is the same. So yes, in small caps, the valuation is definitely looking fairly rich. But mid-caps are a different story. Mid-caps are actually trading at a 30% discount to large and small caps today because they are in the middle spot. They have enough liquidity in the free float, they have some FII interest, and there is domestic buying. So I would say that given the way the economic story of India is going to play out, mid-caps are in a sweet spot. Small caps, less so. So in small caps, I would say you've got to stretch your horizon to 5 years today. Whereas in mid caps, even from a 2.5 to 3 year perspective, I see a good potential for wealth creation. So I would separate mid and small caps and say the sweet spot is in the mid cap space today.
Value or growth stocks, what would you prefer?
So as a fund house and as a personal thing, I always prefer growth. Okay, the reason is that value in Indian context of a growth economy, value is a good play in developed economies where you're seeking stability of earnings and you say that the replacement cost of something is, very, very high, and so you have value there. In India, the value often goes through this period of cyclicals, right? When the market is down cyclically, right, they are undervalued. But when the market catches up, they become more valued. So value is always a short-term tactical play, which you can keep playing, but it's not something like the international value where you buy it because of the dividend yield, you buy it because of the sustainability. So Indian value is very different. So in India, there are only two types of things. I would take out the word value and would call it as growth versus GARP.
Okay.
GARP is growth at a reasonable price. Yeah. So in India is a perennially growing economy. We are, in that catch-up world. So either you have growth which is priced in, which is there in the consumption space or the IT space, or there is growth which is not yet priced in. So it's available at a reasonable price like cyclicals. So between growth and GARP, actually I support more of GARP. So that's why I hesitate. I gave a slightly different answer, right? For me, growth is important, but at the right price.
Right. So one of the key risks that emerging markets will be facing is the US tapering whenever it comes. Do you expect it to come anytime soon? And if it happens by the end of this year, which most of the guys are talking about, what is the kind of impact that you would see on the emerging markets, including India?
So the consensus, I was looking at the polls on what the analysts expect. See, so bear in mind one thing, the Indian market has been buoyed up by the US liquidity. First, I have no doubt about it. Second, the Fed is still saying that they are not close to tapering. That's number two. But the debt markets and the equity markets are following that, and that's why equity markets are rising in the US and in India. But the debt markets are saying that the Fed is wrong. The debt markets are actually saying that the Fed has got it wrong and that actually tapering is very nearby, and they are actually not admitting that. Because Fed believes that this inflation spike in the US is temporary. They're calling it transient inflation, but the debt markets don't believe the Fed. Okay, so an opinion poll which is taken of the analysts shows that 45% believe that in the last quarter of this year, OND, October, November, December, there will be a taper. And another 16% believe it will be in the next quarter. So you take 60% of the market believes that between October to March, there will be tapering. Okay, that's the market expectation, right? What the Fed actually does is important, but there is mixed signs from the Fed. So it is actually Fed is what is saying is, I want to see ground level numbers on housing starts, on employment, on wage rises, on that before I take a decision. So when this will occur, is a $1 million question, because Fed is obviously in a better state to understand the economy, and they are still saying that tapering is not near. But I believe that if the news surprises on the positive front, tapering could very well happen before in the October to March period. I think it's the data which is driven. So from my point of view then, to answer you, is that I believe that tapering is definitely going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Okay, and that tapering, you just go back to May 2013, you will realize what that word means for the Indian stock market. There will be a severe, immediate impact on the market as and when it occurs. So I think we should be prepared for that. You may get the months this way or that way. But if you want to play safe and say 1 year, it's definitely going to happen in the next 1 year.
So what is the kind of strategy that RBI would really work on, say, in next few months starting?
So RBI, you see, RBI will be driven by domestic inflation. And in domestic inflation also, RBI is not so much concerned about imported inflation or about food inflation. And food also, the monsoon forecast is good. So there's no worry. It's the demand side pickup. And the demand side pickup, I don't think is going to be so strong anywhere in the near future for RBI to go into a rate hike. But RBI may have to rate hike because the US rates hike. Otherwise, the currency will get impacted. Because India today is in a situation where We have to balance the import cost, currency weakens, Indian currency weakens if you don't depreciate if you don't raise the interest rates, then your imports, you are essentially a commodity importing country.
Yeah.
So then that will have a bad impact on domestic inflation. So RBI will have to not just look at domestic demand, they'll have to keep a view on what the Fed is doing. RBI cannot say Fed is doing what they do, I will do what I do. No, it has to go hand in hand. But liquidity, they will keep the tap open. Interest rates, they may be forced to follow the Fed's routine, but in liquidity, they will try to support the Indian economy.
If that is the case, that as you said, that markets discount forwards, so can we expect some kind of a volatility, choppiness in the markets coming in next 1 or 2 months?
Absolutely. Bang on. I think you're in for an extremely volatile period because, see, while there is a lot of action happening, the COVID second wave appears to have peaked. It is easing off. The government has also made vaccines free for everybody, but there is still vaccine hesitancy in India. One. Second is the fact that though the government has made it free, we still don't have the supply of the vaccine. It will take a few months to come in. So there will be mixed information flowing around, right? And so the whole uncertainty will play on the market. So I think we are in for a period of extended volatility.
So the sectors you are overweight on and the sectors that you would stay underweight.
So from a perspective of there are two aspects to the portfolio. One is the portfolio from a medium-term perspective, right, where my mid cap, my small cap, those kind of funds have. And then you have the large cap and the multi cap, which are more tactical and try to manage it better. So in the mid cap and the small cap, we are heavily overweight on the industrials and the cyclicals, right? We believe that ultimately the Indian economy will, because the government has done this infrastructure plan in the budget, the government has announced the PLI scheme, government has liberalized a lot of things for FDI to come in. We saw record FDI flows. All of that, we believe that purely the PLI scheme will lead to 6 lakh crores, 6 trillion rupees of capex coming through. But it will take time. You can't be saying tomorrow it will happen. So our mid cap, small cap, and those kind of portfolios are built with a focus on industrials as the growth path. In my flexi cap, multi cap, and large cap kind of a category, we are reasonably bullish on private sector banks still. We believe that they will still come out of the thing because any growth needs to be financed. So we believe that they are in a good space. We believe IT is in a good space, both because the world recovery will be good for IT, unlike domestic sensitive one. Second, any currency depreciation will help IT. Third is because of the fact that the world has transformed because of the pandemic in terms of work from home, using cloud and everything, business opportunities for IT companies will be phenomenal. So we are very bullish on IT as a space. We believe that barring the next 2 quarters, consumer discretionary should come back, right? And so I would say these are the 3 main things that we are positive about.
After a lull of around 5 to 6 years in the real estate sector, do you see any scope of this sector reviving and coming back into action?
Definitely. I think the real estate sector has 3 drivers to it. One is, I think that the housing sector is, I think, looking at a very sweet spot. Today, the average affordable EMI is only 27% of a person's salary, which last was seen in 2003-04. So I think that the low interest rates, the stable real estate prices, plus the incomes of the lower class have got affected in the pandemic, but not the upper middle class. So I think that there will be good housing demand to help the realty sector. Second is, I believe that the work from home concept, while it has come to stay and may affect corporate real estate demand, I think new models of work will mean more people will look to shift outside of the cities and live in separated entries. So I think the real estate sector will, and I think regulation has come in and helped a lot the real estate sector. So we think that it's passing through an uncertain phase, but the long-term outlook for the real estate sector is good because government support will be there because it's one of the biggest employment generators, and government's focus is on creating employment in the run-up to the next election in the next 3 to 4 years' time, right? So we remain confident that the real estate sector will revive.
So do you also believe that commodity super cycle is here, and what is the big story that will play out in commodity space in the next 4 to 5 years?
So in the next 6 months to a year, I don't expect the super cycle to play out much further because this cycle was driven by the Chinese growth. So in China, already the inflation concerns plus the credit rising fast has meant that the government has tried to cool down the lending to the commodity space. And so I think that China story has already played out. Right now, the next story for it to play out, and oil as a commodity is on a sweet balance between the suppliers wanting to keep the price at 60 plus, and the fact that if you raise it too much, the world recovery is still not on there. So I think oil will remain in this band for some time. That's not a concern. The commodity cycle for the next super stage will depend on two things. One is the growth around the advanced economies rebounding back. So we'll have to look at how that plays out. But second is whether Mr. Biden is able to get his $2 trillion infrastructure spending plan through the both houses of parliament. While on paper, he has the majority in both, what we understand is that a lot of Democrats themselves are not supporting this bill. So he's trying to get some Republicans to support to pass it. So that's slightly uncertain. But if that announcement goes through and happens, then the markets will anticipate the next commodity super cycle, and that gets through. So it's very event-based.
What's your view on the BFSI sector? You said you're positive on the financials. The kind of the gap between the private sector bank and the PSU banks is now narrowing down. So, which sector, which vertical are you in favor of, private or public?
No, for me, the BFSI space is clearly quality versus non-quality. So whether it is public sector or private sector, I would bet on the quality. So to me, the quality is a filter, because good public sector banks, their reach, their CASA advantage is unbeatable. Whereas good private sector banks, their efficiency, their turnaround time, their conscious focus on NPAs and not doing any bad loans, that's good. So if I pick quality as a pick, then I'm neutral to public sector, private sector, NBFCs. So I think the quality is the key. Quality is what? Good promoters, which in the case of public sector, of course, the government is a promoter, but good balance sheets, good ability to raise low cost capital. So this as a three, if I take as a filter for quality, I would say that I would choose from across the public sector, private sector, and the NBFC space for my picks. And then when you said BFSI, the one thing we are very bullish on is the increasing demand for insurance in the country, both health insurance and life insurance. I think all of that are in a sweet spot thanks to the pandemic. So I think that's a long-term secular growth story. And we believe on the back of that, wealth management and asset management companies are also poised to benefit. So the non-lending piece of BFSI is also as important as the lending part of the BFSI.
So global cyclicals or domestic cyclicals, what would you prefer?
Global cyclicals, because we believe that the global economy is poised on the rise. And so domestic cyclicals will take time, because our government, end of the day, while they've announced 111 lakh crore infrastructure project, we don't have the money. So we have to wait for FDI to come in. So it's a slower process. It will take a longer. But internationally, globally, right, the monetary stimulus and the fiscal stimulus will still start yielding results. So I would trust the global cyclicals at this point as an earlier recovery story than the domestic cyclicals.
So what is your view on the auto space? Because the pent-up demand that we have been talking about does not seem to be panning out as in the near term, because we are just waiting for the monsoon season to really hit and see how the rural demand pans out. So what is your view on the auto space? Would you say stay invested or stay away for some time?
So auto is 5 compartments. You can't treat auto as one. Okay. So I start with the low-end auto, which is your two-wheelers and your entry-level cars, right? There, I think the pandemic and others has affected the demand, but that will be boosted by the rural demand when a good monsoon plays out. So from Diwali onwards, we see that the passenger personal vehicle segment, as I call it, will revive. The second segment is the agricultural auto segment, which is tractors, power tillers, which because of a good monsoon, I see again that you will see a good demand. That's the second part. The third part is what I will call it as the commercial vehicle segment, which is more cyclical to economic recovery. Yeah. That is at least 12 to 18 months away, because industrial activity has to pick up, freight has to pick up, freight rates have to pick up for that to pick up. So that's one more. Then one more thing on the final thing on the auto would be the auto component space, which is actually a global cyclical, because auto components is an export story where depending on the way the world recovers that. So each one of these has to be played differently. I would not classify auto as one monolith and treat it that way.
So do you like auto ancillary space right now?
Yes, because it's export oriented. I think the rupee is overdue for depreciation. That will help export.
So your advice to youngsters, the first time investors who are entering into stock market and really want to create wealth for themselves in say next 10 to 15 years?
So one is, of course, the tool they should use should be SIP, because they're youngsters, they have a long income stream. So allocating that, rupee cost averaging, power of compounding, all of that come. But I would say that youngsters, because they're more aware of the international market, they should look at global funds also. Because I think global funds, I didn't suggest it because they are end of the day high risk category. But a youngster with a long outlook can definitely take that, because the long term, the rupee depreciation, which is a given the difference of about 4 to 5% in the interest rate between India and America, that should be the normal long-term rate of depreciation, which the past has proved. So they can benefit, and the global recovery is probably going to happen earlier than the Indian recovery, right? As I said, global cyclical. So I would say that allocating an SIP to a global fund will mean that over the long term, you can create dollar equivalent wealth. Right? Because our youngsters have aspirations. They want to go on foreign holidays. They want to do a lot of stuff. They're not India concentrate. So for them, a significant allocation to globally diversified funds, right, is a good way to go along. At the same time, I would say that for domestic investment for them, I would still say at the smaller end of the curve, stick to mutual funds. At the large cap end of the curve, they can try index funds and this funds there. So there you can't go wrong too much. But in the smaller end, there aren't too many index funds in small cap and all that. And it's very, very tough to manage. So stick to mutual funds at the smaller end of the cap curve. And you can try out your passives in the larger end of the curve. But all of the time, please do the SIP route.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Subramaniam.